Clinton betrayed all Americans after what she said about Trump defending the national anthem. Everybody knows that Colin Kaepernick's polarizing decision to protest the national anthem was a stupid thing to do. Honoring and respecting the flag of our nation is also paying respect for those who paid the ultimate sacrifice to keep our nation safe and free. Hillary Clinton told MSNBC that defending the American national anthem is a racist act and claims boycotting it is an act of bravery. In a wild rant to MSNBC host Chris Hayes, the deluded presidential loser issued a scathing attack on Trump over his criticism of the NFL players who knelt during the national anthem. IndependentSentinel.com reports Hillary thinks Trump speaking up for the anthem is racist. Hillary Clinton gave an interview to Chris Hayes on MSNBC, and in addition to bashing Trump, she listed all the reasons she didn't win the election. She attacked Trump for his stance on the NFL and the anthem. It's apparently racist. She began the interview by saying the president doesn't care about Puerto Rico, but don't worry, she's involved. FEMA is down there. I've called on them to send the Navy, particularly the Navy hospital ship, she assured Hayes. Who is she to call on the Navy? This woman is delusional. Why doesn't she send the money she collected for Haiti to Haiti instead? Click this link to see the Crooked Hillary Clinton Foundation tax return for 2014. The foundation received $177 million in contributions and spent $86 million in expenses to donate a measly $5 million in actual charity donations. Not standing for the national anthem is a sign of disrespect which should never be allowed. Listen to her. It's like a 10-minute interview, but listen to this deranged woman.
For all of us watching this, it sometimes feels like you can't make heads or tails, or you can't keep up, or you can't process it. And I wonder if it feels the same for you.
No, it feels different for me. Because every time I see him do or say something, I know it's a deliberate choice that he's making at the expense of something else.
You think that?
Yes, I do.
This is a point of tremendous contention in the world of Trump analysis.
No, I know, and I'm, it's like being a criminologist. You're a Trumpologist, but I've watched him quite closely. So let's take what you just said.
Yeah.
He clearly doesn't want to talk about Puerto Rico. More than 3.5 million American citizens, along with the U.S. Virgin Islands.
I'm going to interrupt here. When she said criminologist, Hillary's long list of you know what, and she's talking about Trump.
Not interested. Doesn't say a word about it. Now, FEMA is down there. I've called on him to send the Navy, particularly the naval hospital ship called U.S. Comfort. I really think that would be a big help. We don't hear a word. And we don't hear anybody high up in the administration. You don't hear from the vice president or anybody else.
Where the hell are you?
So he doesn't think that has any political relevance, and it's certainly not personally important. He attacks black athletes, as he did, starting with his rally in Alabama, continued on Twitter, and he attacks them for protesting peacefully for equality, for standing up for what they believe. And he does it once again to dog whistle to his base and to try to detract attention from other things that are going on. But it's quite telling that he is willing to attack black athletes. He never says anything of an insulting manner toward white supremacists or neo-Nazis or Ku Klux Klanners or Vladimir Putin, right? And then we've got North Korea, which is looming over us and which has continued to escalate verbally with him sort of pushing it along. I don't understand what their strategy is, and now we've got the North Koreans saying, well, if he's going to talk like that and essentially declare war against us, we're going to believe we have the right to shoot down American planes. Now, all of this is swirling around at the same time, but he's making choices. And his choices are to continue to stimulate, motivate, and get the acclamation from his hardcore base that he saw in Alabama and that he continues to reach out to. And it's almost without regard to the consequences of trying to denigrate American athletes for exercising their constitutional rights, for continuing to pick rhetorical battles with North Korea. It is something that he instinctually, viscerally does. But I think there's also a calculation to it.
This is really interesting to me because I think this is a central analytical question about how this individual operates, because there's these kind of two theories of him. One is that there's this kind of, he's this kind of accidental maelstrom, that these sort of variety of factors in broader American life have put him in this position. And the other is that he's quite a canny manipulator.
I'm with the second.
You are with the second.
Yes.
And
now, sometimes his canny manipulation gets out of control, and even he goes too far. But he was a canny manipulator when he became a birther. That was not accidental.
Right.
That was deliberate. He was a canny manipulator when he started his campaign, basically insulting immigrants and calling Mexicans rapists and criminals, and you can go on and on. It was designed to really attach himself to enough of a core of Republican voters that he would get the nomination, and then he would go from there, and along the way he would say things like, we're not going to touch Medicare, we're not going to touch Medicaid, all of which he had, you know, no real allegiance to. So
as one can see what's happening.
As we can see in real time. And so therefore I think he was manipulating on behalf of himself, and he wanted to plug into, look, the dark underbelly in American politics. It's been there forever. It's not a new phenomenon, but what we have done over time is to try to contain it and prevent it from, you know, being too big a voice in our politics.
It's funny you say that, because there was this quote today that was sort of perfectly, I think, buttons this up. This is someone talking to White House reporter Jim Acosta, who says, Trump advisor tells me POTUS is winning the culture war. This is after this weekend in which he's fighting with athletes. Just made millionaire sports athletes his new Hillary Rodham Clinton.
I don't know who would have said that to Jim Acosta, but I'm sure that's what a big slice of his advisors, both inside the White House and now outside the White House, believe.
Right.
Because his whole campaign...
But does it work?
Well, it worked well enough to get him the nomination. With the help of Jim Comey and the Russians, it worked well enough to get him elected, as I write in my book, because, yeah, I think that the way he positioned himself and his, you know, really outrageous language, his insults and attacks, all of that, you could not take your eyes off of him. I mean, nobody could figure out what he would do next, which by definition kind of controlled the audience, right? And so he was able to keep slamming, and so everything bad that was said about him, everything that, you know, anybody reported about him, whether it was bankruptcies or defrauding elders and defrauding students, the whole 9 yards.
Or the ads that you guys ran of his own words, which essentially was, look,
yes.
The argument was, prima facie, this is not a person who should have nuclear.
Right. Well, yes.
I mean, you literally ran it.
Yeah, somebody, you know, who tweets, right?
And yet, I mean, that's the question, right? Because it all seems like he's playing these 40-60 politics, meaning 40% of the public's with him, 60% is against him, which shouldn't work in a majoritarian democracy, and yet is somehow working.
But think about this, Chris. His first goal is to try to control the Republicans as much as he can. And so what he's doing with that 40%, which still remains a supermajority of Republicans, is to control the party, control his chances going forward, try to discipline or jettison Republicans who don't agree with him by threatening to get them primary opponents or threatening to support the most radical Trump loyalist in a race. So he's trying to maintain that Republican core.
But I guess the question here is, like, and I've read your book and enjoyed it quite a bit. I think it's got a sort of tone that's rare in these kinds of books. It's sort of intimacy to it. That there's this sort of push and pull, even within your understanding of what happened. The degree to which this was a fluke or not a fluke. I mean, when you say absent Comey and the Russians, right, he wouldn't have won. So it's like at one level, there's something he's doing that really is rewriting the rules of American politics.
I agree with that.
And it's also the case that he was the beneficiary of a bunch of exogenous shocks.
Right.
And so I guess the question is, when you think of where he is now politically, how do you read his political strength? Because those two frameworks still seem, to me, you could bring to bear.
Well,
you can make an argument for either one, that he's strong or weak.
But look at what he's doing. What he's doing is trying to double down on what worked for him.
Yes.
Take me out of it, and thanks for the nice compliments about the book, but part of the reason I wrote it was so that people who care about our democracy and our future will read it and learn some lessons, and here are some of the lessons. He is doubling down on voter suppression. Now, he knows that if he can restrict the electorate, and all of his Republican allies know, they will have a better chance of retaining control in the states and beginning to try to, expand that reach, because they will have shrunk the electorate. This is one of the most serious insults that you can imagine to a democracy that is supposed to be one person, one vote, and which, we have a Voting Rights Act, which the Supreme Court got it. Secondly, they learned a lot from the whole Russian intervention. And we're now learning a lot of what they learned. What happened with Facebook? I mean, being paid in rubles was sort of hard to believe at first, but now it's become kind of emblematic of what was going on. They understood far better than I did, because it was new, that...
Are you guys sick yet listening to this deranged woman? And she has the you-know-what to go on television and say these things. I mean, it's astounding at this point. It's astounding. A criminal. She shouldn't be allowed to show her face. Her rallies were empty, and yet she thinks that she has the popular vote with the illegals voting. Is this woman delusional? Trump won the electoral vote by a landslide. What does that tell you?
That they could ally themselves with very big, powerful forces like the Mercers and Cambridge Analytica and the Russians and WikiLeaks, and there could be a really, very impressive, strong coalition, all with the same goal: to help him and hurt me.
Even the guy is looking at her like she's sick in the mind anyway. He's saying, I can't believe I'm sitting here listening to this delusional witch, but they're paying me to do this, and it goes on.
And so they were able to see in real time the results of that. And one of the things I try to explain in the book, and I hope that we'll get to the bottom of this eventually, is that the WikiLeaks publication of stolen emails were weaponized. They didn't just go out into the atmosphere. They were weaponized. The worst case is the whole Pizzagate tragedy in
Yeah, like that wasn't true.
Washington, and thank goodness nobody died when that young man showed up with his automatic weapon. So they've learned things that work.
She set up the guy. What do you think? She set up the guy with the automatic weapon. This is hysterical, and she expects the people to believe this.
Double down on suppression. If you can, continue to get help from the Russians, and he's got to be at least contemplating that, because he sure isn't saying anything negative about them, but at least learn the lessons from them.
So I'm very curious to hear your honest gut version of what your theory is on this, and I'll tell you what mine is first, because I was a person who thought for a long time that the Russians and the Trump campaign had coincident interests, and because they had coincident interests, which they both wanted Trump elected, there was no reason for them to collude, because all the oars are rowing in the same direction. So the Russians are doing what they're doing to elect Donald Trump. Donald Trump's doing what he's doing to elect Donald Trump. And if they're working together, and then the Don Jr. email came out. And for me, for my own sort of personal theory that I...
Which was, again, a setup by Hillary Clinton, that getting Loretta Lynch to extend the Russian lawyer's visa, who had nothing to do with Russia herself. All a setup through her.
Walk through my data with to change things. Because I thought to myself, well, you get an email saying this is part of the Russian government. You believe there was collusion, right?
What I believe is that there was communication there was ongoing contacts, which the Trump team went to great lengths to try to hide, which does raise questions. I believe that the weapon is...
You know, you gotta be sick to believe this woman. She's a criminal. She should be in an orange jumpsuit behind bars a long time ago. She talks about criminals. This is the epitome of a criminal. A sociopath, exactly. She takes no blame, no responsibility. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. And again, thank you so much for watching.